what's going on? It's Isaac Grundy here. Thanks so much for tuning in again to our Racial Reconciliation Table Talk. This is part 2 of our conversation. If you have not watched the last part, I encourage you to go back and watch that. In this particular video, we're talking about the actual definition of racism, what it looks like, and how it affects us in our everyday lives. Check it out.
Has there ever been a time, and we're going to get to that privilege just in a second, has there ever been a time, though, that you witnessed your peers do something that was racist, and you either didn't speak up about it, or vice versa, where you did something racist, and your peers around you didn't check you, didn't say, hey man, that wasn't right, that wasn't cool? Has that ever been a moment in your life? And I know this is tough, it's a tough question to ask, but this is the conversations that we have to have. Of saying, you know what, yeah, like Tom said, you know what, I have some prejudice in my life. I have treated people differently. I have messed up sometimes. So has anyone had an experience where you witnessed your peers do something that was not right and you didn't check it? Or vice versa, where you were doing something that you knew was not right and they didn't check you? Let's go to Jay.
All right, I know from when I was with the sheriff's office, I was a supervisor. We had a new guy that had just gotten out of training. And so he got to where he was stopping a bunch of Hispanics. And it's like, the only reason he was stopping them is just because they were Hispanic and probably didn't have a license and he could get an arrest. So one night I heard him call out a car and I knew what it was. And so I tried to get there as fast as I could because I knew what he was trying to do. And I get there and I asked him, I said, well, what'd you stop him for? He said, I stopped him, his tail light's out, tag light was out, is what he sounded like. You might want to look again because the tag light is working. And the only reason he stopped him is because he was Hispanic. So we ended up, doing some stuff, trying to do some training with him. Eventually he left the department because he got in some more trouble. But it just upset me that he was doing it just because he thought, hey, no license, it's an easy arrest. Well, I don't know, that just upset me because I'm not that way. I'm just like, you treat everybody just like you want your family treated. And, that's the way I do everybody when I deal with people is, if it was my family, let's say he's the police officer and he's dealing with my family. How do I want him to treat my family if I'm not there? I want him to treat them just like, they're a human being and a person, not just because they're Hispanic, black, purple, white, polka dot, or whatever. So, that's my experience and where I had somebody that was trying to do something just because it was a different, race or whatever than what they were. And he had that prejudice there. And, whether or not it was still from him being grown up or, in his household, I have no idea. But, it never, I didn't help him because, like I said, he left. He ended up getting fired, I think, for some other stuff that he did.
Well, we had, as I had mentioned, we had our sweet, sweet boys that came to live with us for a while, and we actually have some family members in our family that are racist, and they would say things, and we had one in particular that basically said, well, I guess we won't be coming for Christmas this year. And I said, well, okay, I'm sorry to hear that, but, the boys aren't leaving. And so you can make your choice. You can either come and spend time with our complete family, or you can choose to not be here. And they were there for Christmas because it was, we just put our feet down and said, these boys are important to us, and this is where we stand, and that's your choice. And they ended up coming, and it ended up being a beautiful holiday, and it ended up being an opportunity for them to let down their guard of the lies and deceit that they had been taught over the years and get to know these boys in the way that we had. And it ended up being a really beautiful thing. But yeah, we had to put our foot down about it and just say, you know what, fine, don't come.
The world need more Heathers. My first, well, not my first, there's somebody near and dear to me that I'm continually checking, even to this day. I'm always hearing stuff like, all these, the C word, always trying to get over, or this is that, and I'm always like, what? Like, I look up to you, you know what I'm saying? Like, I look up to you, so why are you talking like that? And I found myself as the mentee or as the younger person, you know, or as the less than, having to step up and check them and say things that I felt was going to put tension in between our relationship. But I'm like, look, you don't want them to call me the end, or you don't want them to call us the end. So why is it okay for us to call them the C's? You know what I mean? Like, we got to stop that. We got to stop calling people by, you know, that, I don't know where it even comes from, right? But yeah, I deal with it and still deal with it today, and still trying to say, could you please stop saying that? And and I'm gonna go this far. It even goes as far as my kids. I would hear it, say it around my kids, and that's when I will really kind of almost to a sense, like, I gotta remember I'm a Christian, so I try to find prayer, I try to find grace, I try to find mercy, but I'm like, you know, it's like a nudge, like, are you serious? Like, don't plant that into my kid. Like, another generation don't need to hear this. And you're not even conscious. It's so natural to you that you just say it. And you can't just be naturally practicing that, because now you have kids growing up around you that may pick that up and start saying it, and then it's their fault because that seed was sold into them. So yeah, I deal with it still to the day.
Which leads me to ask this, and Stephanie talked about it a little bit earlier. The question of the hour, what is white privilege? And I want, just give me two answers for this. What is white privilege?
To me, well, I'm gonna go ahead and start off. To me, white privilege is just having that ability or comfortability of just walking down the street without having to worry about, is the police gonna, maybe arrest me today, or just for me walking down wearing a hoodie, things like that. That's real talk. Also as well, could be as far as, we did mention education a little bit earlier. Potentially some people do have that opportunities as far as, what she mentioned, as far as, a woman over a man, as far as, privileges, or, having that degree and not having that degree. So, to me, that, it's just, when you do get in those situations as far as, hey, I'm pulled over, and not having to, have that panic attack of, hey, man, I'm not sure if I'm going to go home or not, because I've definitely been in those situations, and just being comfortable around a police officer, to me that's like one of the top 5 worst feelings, getting pulled over. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I could say it. I think having a black daughter, I get a lot of people will come to me and ask a lot of questions, maybe that they wouldn't ask other people. That can, that if they want answers or they want my perspective. So I've had a lot of conversations about this because it's an uncomfortable phrase for white people to hear. I mean, I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, no. I worked hard. My dad worked really hard to get into a different position for our family than his family was in, and but then I learned, of course, learning more about that was he even had the certain privileges availed to him to get us into a better life than he had. And so I do remember talking to a friend of mine. He called me and he just literally said, "Do you really think we have privilege?" That was like how we opened the conversation. I was like, okay, let's talk about this, right? So let's have a conversation. But talking about it, and I mean, we talked for like an hour, and we went through a lot of different things. And finally, he said to me, he goes, "So what you're saying, like what you mean is it's like a head start?" And I was like, yeah, that's a really good way to put it. There's a head start that we had, and maybe the head start started, hundreds of years ago, or maybe it started, whenever. But when you start thinking through all the things that white people have had as owning land and building wealth, and then even if you came to America and looked white, right, you immediately get associated with that group of people that already own land and that have built wealth and have a certain societal privilege. So you have a head start on a lot of areas, even if it's being comfortable around police, right? I mean, we just immediately have that head start to to not be concerned. I would, if I get pulled over, I'm assuming that it's going to go fine, that I might not even get a ticket. And I also assume that most cops are good, right? I mean, so I don't have I have a lot of feelings that I don't have to worry about just because of how I've grown up and just what I look like, being a white man. There's just that head start. I thought that was a great way to put it, simple.
Just going to say quickly on add into what Derek was saying. I think as well, when white people say, "I don't have it," or I have had to work for it, I think a response to that is to say, well, white privilege, because it comes from societal stuff that has been how other people view you because you're a white person or a white male. That's what it is. It's not anything that you've done. And I think actually reminding people that white privilege is not something from you, but something that how other people perceive you can be a way to kind of get through actually breaking down and helping people realize what it is.
Brother, real quick, I think white privilege is the ability or the privilege to be you without irrational penalty. And there we are.
Let me ask you this. In your own words, what is prejudice, what is discrimination, and what is racism? What is prejudice, what is discrimination, and what is racism? And we'll try to keep this to two people too as well. Racism, what is prejudice, what is discrimination, what is racism? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I have my own opinions on this before I actually researched and hear different perspectives, but also getting the definition, not just my own, just to create an opinion, but getting actual definitions of this. And so I think this is critical that we come to an understanding of what actually is prejudice, what actually is discrimination, and then what is racism. Anybody feel comfortable?
Ignorance.
What'd you say?
Ignorance.
Ignorance.
That's what it is. Complete ignorance.
Ignorance. Okay, Heather?
I kind of feel like it's a step process of you create a prejudice against someone based on whatever that might be, and then discrimination is when you start like removing them from you because of that prejudice. And then racism is that stepping over the boundary of hatred and just pushing them away completely because they are different. I think it's kind of I think it's a step-by-step process to becoming where we push people away. I think it's just like, prejudice is the beginning of, well, I don't like this person because they're different in some way. But then discrimination is that next step of, well, that prejudice is bothering me enough that I don't want to be around them. But then racism is the final step of, I despise that person because of that difference that I have created or I have thought of in my mind. It's kind of like God's word. It starts in our heart, but then it comes out of our mouths, and it's like so it's like just that process. I feel like it's one step at a time of getting to the other side of things where it shouldn't go, but it does.
Absolutely. This is the definition. It says racism by definition is the thoughts, as you're saying, Heather, the thoughts, prejudice, right? And then acts, discrimination, that are carried out against someone or a group of people based off their race or ethnicity, typically one that is a minority or more marginalized. According to the American Psychological Association, there's individual racism and institutionalized racism that can take place. So individual racism, that it says, is a personal belief in the superiority of one's race over another. It is linked to racial prejudice and discriminatory behaviors, which can be an expression of implicit or explicit biases. It says institutionalized racism is a system of assigning value and allocating opportunity based on skin color. It unfairly privileges some individuals and groups over others, and it influences social institutions in our legal, educational, and governmental systems. It is reflected in disparities in, but not limited to, wealth, income, justice, employment, housing, medicine, education, and voting. It can be expressed implicitly or explicitly, and occurs when a certain group is targeted and discriminated against based on race. There's this book called White Fragility by author Robin DiAngelo, and in the book she says that from her research and her perspective, she says that institutionalized racism is basically, if you think about a bird cage, and she says that if you take one of those bars on the bird cage by itself, okay, the bird can handle that one cage, or that one bar, right? The bird can get around it, no problem. If you take on 5 more bars, okay, the bird is still fine. He can get around, it's no problem, right? But he says that the institutionalized racism, right, is the collectiveness of all the bars together that holds the bird in place. And so even if the bird is trying to get around, it's doing everything that it can, collectively, it can't go nowhere because every single bar is working against it. It's not just one bar that affects it. One bar alone, yeah, you probably can get past it, right? One thing alone, 2 things alone, 3 things, sure, you probably can get past it. But collectively, I can't do anything. Every single area, every single way that I turn, it's going against me. All that being said, I want to ask this question, and I want you guys to be very, very honest. Is police brutality an issue of over-policing, of lack of screening/training? Is police brutality a lack of policing or over-policing, or a lack of screening? Is police brutality due to too many police officers in the field, or is police brutality a lack of not having specific and deep requirements to be a police officer? And Jay, I'd like to start with you, obviously, because you are a police officer. You're going to have, obviously, a good perspective on this.
I mean, like for here in Cherokee County, I mean, we have good training. So, I mean, we do diversity training that we have to do every year, which is required in Georgia. You have to do diversity training, use of force training that's required every single year that you have to do, which helps with what you're talking about. And it does come back to training on how somebody does something. If there is like an unjustified use of force or whatever, it's always going to roll back around to what was that particular officer's training, what's their background or whatever. So I can just speak for here. As far as how that goes, I can't speak for other jurisdictions, but I mean, training is a big part of it. I don't think it's because there's too many police officers. I don't think that has anything to do with it. And then too, it's the individual officer too. If they're already racist or have prejudice against somebody, it doesn't matter how much training they have. It's not going to make a difference. They're still, it's in every profession you've got people that are bad. It doesn't matter what the profession is. And I mean, you've got people that get law enforcement, they want to drive fast or whatever, or, hey, I can get in fights and all that. That's the reason they get into it. So I think it comes down to the individual person and what's in their heart and how they feel. So, and can you weed it out before they get hired? Some of them you can, because you see how they are when they're going through the process. Others, you've seen it, they can get through. So they need to probably have more stuff where in law enforcement you have groups like, whether it's a Christian group or whatever, where you meet and you talk about stuff like this, because there's not enough of that going on right now. So that's my take is, ultimately it falls back on you on me as an individual. Because too, if I see somebody that's using excessive force, I need to step in and stop that. I don't need, and you see too many times where you'll see something happening and you see 5 officers standing around watching, and you're like, why aren't you, get in and stop it, who cares? If you lose your job, you lose your job, go find another one, but you're keeping something from happening that shouldn't happen. So, I've seen that before, and you have to step in, you can't just stand there.
That's good. And like I said, like you said, it's individual, but it's a hard problem. What we're facing with discrimination and even the police officers and racism is a hard problem. When I moved to Georgia in 2007, I got pulled over by a police officer in 575. And it was 4 in the morning, on my way to open the store. By the time I was managing Starbucks. And when I got pulled over, the first thing he said when I talked to him, he said, "Are you drunk?" I said, "No." That's my accent, in Spanish. Anyway, short story is, another police officer come, The police officer get me out of the car, and I heard the police officer, the one come, said, let it go. Somebody can take the car and let it go because it was a problem with insurance. We transferred the insurance from Florida to Georgia, so it's nothing really illegal. I cannot drive the car, but I don't know any of that thing. So the one police officer said, let it go, and then I one said, no, we take it, and they arrest me, all right? But at that point, what I want to say is, right now, I have a very good friends, police officer, great fathers, good people, but I think it's a hard problem. And I told this to my 3 boys all the time. I don't care you're gonna be a lawyer or engineer, but I want you to have a good heart, because I think that will solve a lot of the problems in our lives. So.
What's the long-term solution to decrease police brutality, right? Because we know that until Jesus comes back, there's always going to be sin in the world, right? And as Jay said, in any profession, it doesn't matter if it's police, you're a doctor, whatever, like there's always going to be those bad apples or whatever. Like there's always going to be some type of people in that organization or part of that team that are going to mess it up for everybody else. So long-term wise, how can we decrease police brutality? What do you think that is the solution to decrease it long-term? Go ahead, Tom, and then we'll go to Stephanie.
Yeah, so a couple of things is, I think one, working on the kind of screening processes in advance. I mean, Jay, as you were saying about kind of weeding out the people that are doing it for the wrong reasons, as we get in all professions, but actually, if we do a better job of screening ahead of time and finding out those motivations, we can reduce some. And then I think also just actually having groups get together. I mean, we at Revolution, we have obviously officers come to monitor things for our student nights. Recently, we had an officer come who was playing 9 square with the kids, and they were just hanging out with them. And actually, just things like that, where they get to know the students, and the students get to know an officer, not because they've been pulled over, but because they're playing a game. Things like that will, I think, help longer term.
I was just going to go back to leadership. If police brutality is not tolerated, if there are stiffer penalties for it, I mean, then it's a deterrent. Even if your heart isn't right, which we can't control, if you know that the consequences are going to be severe for it, then you're less likely to do it.
Well, and going back to one of the things that you said about stepping in situations and things like that, don't make it a situation where they're going to lose their job if they step in and do the right thing. You know, understand what is that right thing, what is the boundaries in police brutality, and what are your rights as officers standing around to be able to step in and do that without the risk of losing your jobs and without that being a penalty that, you know, hold each other accountable in all of that. So.
Yeah, I heard it once. I was watching this recent, kind of similar to what we're doing here today, and it was police officers only though, and they were saying like one of the reasons why police brutality doesn't get prevented, like why police officers don't step in, is because bad police officers only do bad things a lot of times around other black police officers, right? You don't have, if I know I can do something bad around this person, well then cool, but if I know that this person is not on my side, and if I know he's gonna check me, well I'm not gonna do it around him. And so a lot of times you have situations where good police officers are not at the scene and all you have is bad, and so therefore it's like, well, why didn't you step in? Well, because he doesn't see it any different. He thinks it was okay, or she thinks it was okay, and so that's part of the issue of it too. But let me ask this: how often do you believe race plays a role in police brutality towards whites and blacks and whatever? Like, how often do you think that plays a role in it? And what determines if it's like that or an excessive force thing? Like, what determines if it's a racial thing or if it's an excessive force thing? We'll go with Chaz.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you repeat the first part of the question just one more time? My bad.
Yeah. So, and how often do you believe race plays a role in police brutality towards minorities?
I got you. So I believe race does play a major factor in police brutality. I feel like police brutality is an action people take because of fear. And a lot of times people fear what they don't know. So if you're around a race or group of people that you don't know or don't know nothing about, you react out of fear. So I feel like one thing that maybe police officers can take is just that integration, maybe potentially, let's say for instance, if you have black, coworkers that you work with, just getting them to integrate with each other outside of work, not just in that work environment, getting to know each other, understanding of, hey, the background, getting them comfortable around each other as far as different backgrounds. So I feel like that plays a major factor, just, getting people integrated with each other.
Yeah. I could say something just out of my ignorance a little bit too. I would feel like it has to play a pretty major role in police brutality. Race has to, because just how I grew up. Like, I grew up around all white people, and we never had the conversation. I've never been worried about a policeman. If someone was pulling me over, I assumed I had either done something wrong or he was trying to help me out, or if my tail light's out, I've gotten pulled over for a light, and it was just, hey, did you know your light was out? Make sure you take care of it, right? So my experience has only been that a policeman wants to help me or help someone, or either I've done something wrong and I'm going to get a ticket, or I might get a pass, right? So until I got older and and of course had my daughter, which it put me around people of color more often, right? And in the path of people of color, and listening to them and hearing their stories, there hasn't really been anyone that hasn't either had a really, had an experience with a police officer, or had someone near them, close to them, that had a negative experience with a police officer. So it does seem to be, just from my perspective, I mean, every cop I know is great, right? Every police person I know has been great. So in my experience, that's what I've known, but hearing the experience of others means that there's something going on. There's definitely something there that has had for entire groups of people to have that connection with law enforcement in a negative way, that race does have to play a part in it.
I think for our generation of young Black, Hispanic, minorities, things of that nature, I think we have a fear, they have a fear of officers. And I'm trying to think back to my childhood and ask myself, did I have a fear of officers? And I didn't. I didn't fear the officers because Officer Friendly came to my community, came to my school, and the officers were involved within my community. And so I didn't fear, I actually saw them as heroes. But when I think about my kids, and I think about my sister's kids and my brother's kids, everybody is afraid of police officers because they no longer see them as heroes. They see them as villains now. They're afraid of them, and they have a fear for them because they don't have any time to communicate with them and connect with them and to build relationships with them, like you guys said. Like, they come over to the youth, ministry and hang out. In the communities where I come from, I don't know if Officer Friendly has a presence anymore, or if the officers are coming to the community to throw the football and play basketball and to throw events with blow up, little things, and shaking their hands and like influencing them and encouraging them. You want to be a police officer? It used to be a cool thing growing up, like you wanted to be a police officer. And now like kids they kind of despise that. And my son actually had a dream and had a desire to be a police officer. And now if you talk to him today, that's not his desire anymore. So I think, waking up Officer Friendly would be a great thing amongst the board, across the board, with great leadership.
See, I grew up with the perspective, because I was born in the 70s, so I'm youngish, old, okay. Anyway, so I grew up with the perspective of, policemen or police officers are, figures of authority, and you respect them as you would a teacher, as you would, your boss. But I also grew up, I guess, somewhere in the middle, because it was a matter of, my father taught me, you're a female driving by yourself. When I was in college, going back and forth, if a policeman pulls you over, because it was a lot of back roads, he said, you go to a populated area, you drive slow, put your hazard lights on, do not stop. So I was, so I kind of grew up with this, with both, like, treating police officers as individuals. Like, you have good ones and you have bad ones. And when you encounter a police officer, you immediately treat them with the respect of an authority figure. You don't automatically assume, but you're cautious at the same time, because you don't know what you're coming up on until you're on it. And it's the same way for a police officer. You don't know if you're coming on a citizen who, has sense, or somebody crazy. You don't know. So I treat I have had great experiences with police officers. I think it's great that we have one in our school, because it allows our kids to interact with them, and the best ones that we've had will get out there during book fair and volunteer, just like what you were saying about your community. They walk the halls, and it's not just because you're in trouble. So I think that has been huge in trying to bridge the gap and maybe repair some of the damage that's been done as far as police officers and citizens, particularly minority citizens. So I think that's great, but I think you just have to have both. Yeah. Respect and caution.
Let's go to Jay real quick, and then we'll. Okay, go ahead, John.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, I just want to make a quick comment. I grew up in a place where police were bad guys, like all of them. If I got pulled over, I was afraid that I was going to be raped, or, like they was going to steal from me, or like a big trouble if, with the police. And in a place of lawlessness, that there's no law, and you get a feeling that you're all by yourself. You're not protected. There's no protection. Society's not going to give you any protection whatsoever. No justice. So that's really awful. And one of the things that I admire always here in the States is the law system. Is it perfect? Well, maybe not, but I like and I admire police, honestly, because my experience, it's always been that it makes me feel safe. My experience has been positive. I remember years ago, my grandma came to visit me, and my daughter was a little baby, and I had to go out for a moment. So I was explaining her, like, well, if there's a fire or something, I grabbed the phone and called 911. And I just dialed 911 and quickly hang up, right? So then, like 10 minutes later, a police was knocking on my door, right? Are you okay? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Did you see that? Like they just came to check if everything was good. That gives me peace of mind. So yes, there are some bad apples. And there are some bad people who are committing bad things also. There are criminals and there are bad, everybody. So I think that the same way that we cannot generalize, like, black people, it's bad police. It's just that they're getting a really bad rep right now. They need a good PR, because I believe that they protect us. Now, like everything in life, I think it's a two-way thing. It has, from each one of us, we have to think how we behave, what we believe, how we act, and, well, that we is going to be the police. The police is going to think the same thing. Like, how can I make it better so we can all work it out? But probably, again, education, but I would hate to see police being damaged, because I think it really holds the society in a nice way.
Jay.
I was thinking a lot of it because I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, so I've seen a lot of change. A lot of it has to do with respect, and I guess, too, the way families are now. Like, I guess when I was growing up, I was in the 70s also. You ate dinner at the table as a family. A lot of kids now are raised on playing video games. The TV raises them. You don't have a lot of families anymore that sit at the table and eat. Plus, all you see on the news, social media and all that, is all you see is the bad thing that police do. You never see anything of any of the good things they do. So all these kids, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, or whatever, all they're seeing is, oh, if I get stopped, this is what's going to happen. You're not seeing, the good stuff that they do out in the community. All you're seeing is the bad stuff. And I think that's the downside of the way the media is now, and all the social media that you didn't used to have. That there's no respect, because I've done plenty of traffic stops, and you'll go up and it doesn't matter what color the person is, And it's kids, they just have no respect, even for adults, not just law enforcement, but, you know, nobody, you'll see kids walk in and there'll be a lady walking in, they'll walk in and just let the door close. You know, there's just, they don't have that respect factor for adults that a lot of us had growing up. And I think that's a lot of the issue is the families, the way, you know, TV's raising them and stuff.
As Stephanie said, and as Jay kind of hit on it now, like the difference between how kids were used to be raised and how they're raised now, right? And I want to say this because, and I know some people, you know, watching this are going to be, oh, well, I don't want to hear that. Well, that's fine. I think as much as we, you know, there are things that police officers can do to correct their mistakes and all that stuff, right? But as Stephanie was saying specifically, like, my job is not to fight on the street. My job is to fight in court. And so even if I've been wrong, even if it's like blatant, even if it's crystal clear that this was racially motivated or my job is to live and fight in court, because I'll never win if I try to fight him on the street or her on the street. I will lose every single time by trying to, well, you did this and every single time it's going to end in an unfortunate event, whether it's you losing your life or you getting punched in the face, whatever, it's always going to be unfortunate, right? Because they're always going to have, and I know that we hate it to a certain extent, they're always going to be, at least on the street, in the right, because, hey, I'm telling you to do this. If he says, hey, give me your license, just give it to him. Here's my license right here. Hey, I need you to step outside the car. Cool, I'll step outside the car. Hey, I need you to be quiet. Okay, cool, I'm waiting. All right? Because I think it adds to the problem if you try to fight your battle out there on the street. Wait till you get in court. Wait till you keep your life. It's not worth your life trying to fight right then and there, right? Get home to your children, get home to your mom and your dad, right? So then tomorrow when you go to court, then you could say loud and clear through your lawyer, hey, this person really treated me wrongly. This person really, I demand a fire. I demand whatever, you know, this, that, and the third, whatever it is, right? But live. Fight your day in court. Go then and then say, you know what, this is how I was treated badly and this is what I want to see happen. Don't try to fight that on the street, man, because it's never going to end in a good way for you or the officer. It's always going to be unfortunate. And we see that in the media time and time again. Whether they were in the wrong or the right, whatever, you can't fight on the street, man. Even if they did something completely wrong, even if you I'm just being raw, even if you got a bust up face, well, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I get all their names. I'm going to make sure that I sue the crap out of them. I'm going to make sure I can do everything that I can legally to make sure that this never happens to somebody else. But if I lose my life here, then I'm repeating the same thing day after day, year after year. If somebody was murdered, people are upset and nothing changes. Let's start saying, you know what? I'm going to fight in court. I'm going to change this. I'm going to scare them through the court system. Do everything I can. It's not, as Adriana said, it's not perfect, but it works. It's not perfect, but it works. Compared to a lot of other places, a lot of other countries, we have a great system here compared to a lot of other places. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and they say, well, you know, that's not, it is what it is. Compared to a lot of places, we have it good here. The law is not perfect, but the law is the law, and it works. It protects us. It keeps us safe. The next thing I want to ask is this, and this is really crucial. And it's one of my, frustrations. Why do you believe black on black crime is brought up every time police brutality is brought up? Why do you believe black on black crime is brought up every single time police brutality is brought up? Anyone can go. Stephanie, you want to start us out?
I think the reason that's brought up is because it is, of course it depends on who's bringing it up, because I've had black people say that to me, what about black on black crime? Crime is committed in proximity. In a black community, you will have black people committing crimes against black people. In a white community, or predominantly white community, you will have white people committing crimes against white people. But cross-racial crime happens less often, generally speaking. The black-on-black crime, to me, is a cop-out. I think it's an excuse, it's a justification, it's a diversion. We all know that the enemy is, one of his favorite tricks is division and distraction. And if I can throw the ball over at black on black crime, then you're not really looking at the issue itself of crime. And I'm just gonna stop there. It's just,
I believe that a badge should not be a privilege, it should be an honor. And so when you think about officers that are abusing that honor and overstepping honor in the name of privilege because they have a badge, I don't think that you could correlate that or compare it to citizens going back and forth, right? Crime outside of leadership. When we look at the badge and we look at officers, we look at leadership. We should think leadership. We should think solutions. We should think, the calm in the midst of the storm. When they show up, there should be a level of responsibility that comes attached to the honor that they have that says, I'm going to diffuse these situations at all costs. When you think about citizens, like you said, we talk black on black crime. Like there's white on white crime, there's black on white crime, there's crime across the board. But there should not be crime where there should be honor. There should not be crime within the dynamic of those that are supposed to keep us in check. We should not let them have a pass, and we can't compare that apple with that piece of bread. They're not even two pieces of fruit. That's just totally different. It's crime of citizens versus imperfect people versus those that we see that are honorable and that are supposed to be more responsible and supposed to be trained to take care of what we can't seem to handle, get a grip on. They're supposed to step in and diffuse that situation. So I don't think it's a cop-out, like you said. It's just a cop-out. It shouldn't even come up in the same conversation.
In terms of like black on black crime, it's always funny because people don't realize, like I said, people don't realize like it's due to proximity, but also due to poverty, right? If you were to take criminals, regardless of what race they are, if you were to take those criminals, okay, in a community, to say they're committing, violent acts or whatever, right? If you were to take those same people and then put them in a position where they're in a positive environment, right, where they have money, where they have education, where they have a home and all that stuff, I guarantee you those same people are not going to still be going out committing crimes. They're not doing that because, I got nothing better to do, so I might as well go and rob somebody, I might as well go and kill somebody, I might as well do it. No, I'm doing this because, you know what, all I have is negative. I'm in a negative environment. I have no positivity, I have no leadership, I have nothing. And so my mind, even though it's not right, I'm gonna resort to, I gotta go take whatever I want because I don't have anything. But if I was put in a position, and again, I'm not making an excuse for anybody, but if I was put in a position to where I was in a positive environment, right, you take those same people, okay, those people are probably not going to be still out committing crimes. And so black on black crime, it's almost in a way to say that, black people are more prone to violence. Black people are more prone to doing, some things that us other citizens wouldn't do. And that's not true, right? Crime in general, right, it deals with a lack of resources. It deals with the people being in impoverished environments. But if you take those people, if you change that community around, I promise you those things wouldn't still be happening, right? And again, it's not an excuse to say, it's okay to do those things, but, right, that's just the reality of it, right? It deals with crime. It deals with lack of resources. It deals with people having images and being told that you're not anything, you're not worth anything. This country doesn't you're not valuable in this country. And so if I'm treated as a dog, then I might as well go and be a dog then. I'm gonna show you that I'm a dog. I'm gonna show you that I'm an animal if that's what you think I am, right? And so it deals with, as one of you guys said earlier, it deals with us just not having compassion towards people and understand that, man, your situation would be drastically different if you were placed in a different environment. It has nothing to do with your skin color. It has nothing to do with, what your tendencies are, whatever. It has everything to do with poverty. It has everything to do with our relationships being broken off from each other and not being good stewards, not treating people caringly, not going into different communities and interacting with people who don't look like us, who don't dress like us, who don't talk like us, right? It deals with that intentionality of it. Jay, I want to ask you, because I know you're a police officer, I know you can speak to this, right? It's so hard to prosecute police officers due to qualified immunity. How can this be updated or reformed in a way that it doesn't without stripping away the protections that officers have? And so like how can that system, how can the police officer, and I'm sure it's probably different from state to state as far as like what they're protected from and whatever, but like as a whole, qualified immunity, if I'm saying that right, qualified immunity, it protects to a certain extent them like being sued for stuff that as an officer you have to break into a car to get a baby out. Well, they're protected from being sued because you broke the window, stuff like that. So how can we update the system to where it doesn't strip away all officers' protections? Because I do believe officers should be protected, right? They have a hard job to do, and so we don't want to, at least in my opinion, we don't want to take away all of their protection to do their job. But how can we update it to where if they are prosecuted, if they do something wrong, then it's not, well, we already know they're going to get off. Well, we already know that it's going to be in and out because the judge is not going to, do anything about it. So how can we update
Well,
that?
I think most of the time on the qualified immunity, that's more in like if they're going to get sued civilly on the federal level. So that doesn't necessarily go with the criminal case. Like if an officer's charged with murder criminally, that's all up to the jury and the grand jury and all on that. The qualified immunity runs more into like if I'm being sued individually or the department's being sued under there's federal rules that, civil rights rules is what it is under the federal thing is where the qualified immunity comes in. And that's more if you're trying to get money and all of that is where that falls into. But as far as like criminal charges, there's, like I said, that's up to the district attorneys when they hold their grand juries. So ultimately, it's on the grand jury, it just depends because it's supposed to be your peers that are on any type of jury. So, it goes into what area you're in, what the population is. If you're in a predominantly white population, what's more than likely going to happen? The officer's going to get off. Because you're going to have the jury pool's going to be predominantly white. Unless you have, unless they. So I think it just has to do with more education and stuff and how they present it to the grand jury and how all that is done. Like I said, the qualified immunity is more on the federal level, and that's all civil and not really criminal. So that's when you're suing, trying to get the millions of dollars or whatever, that you're getting. Like I think the Breonna Taylor case, I think they got like $15 million, I think, from the city on that or something like that. So that would be on what that would be. And I guess they're still working on the criminal. Well, they only charged, one officer, I think, in that case, and it wasn't even with murder they charged on that one.